I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud back here in the Weather Center with live Hurricane Laura coverage. A very dangerous situation continues to take place here, southwestern Louisiana especially, but even into eastern Texas as well. We just got a new extreme wind warning here for parts of Jasper, Newton, Orange, Texas, there in terms of those counties. And then in terms of the parishes in Louisiana, we're talking about Allen, Beauregard, Calcasieu, Cameron, Jefferson, Davis, and Vernon till 5 a.m. Central Time as those extreme winds still occurring, still coming on into some of these spots. I know Lake Charles, Roy, been getting into the action, unfortunately. They've been getting a break a little bit here, though, as the eye wall here has kind of pushed through for now. It seems like now on radar wasn't given the best detection on what was really happening there at the surface, because there were some reports of pretty strong winds despite it looking like they were in the eye wall there in the word or in the eye. Let me clarify that. It's late here, folks, or early at this point. I've been talking for a while, so let me just clarify. I've been misstating that here from time to time, misstating a few things, but we're talking about the eye right now, is what radar shows toward Lake Charles, but they were actually in the eye wall at the surface there, getting those impacts. But right now it looks like they're actually on the eye of the calm, but that eye wall where you have all the wind there coming on in, looks like it's coming back in to the picture, unfortunately, into Ward Calcasieu Parish. So a very dangerous situation. If you're just tuning in here this morning, you see Beauregard Parish really getting to the action, as I was alluding to a moment ago, up toward Ragley, Loneville, even over towards some of the other communities here like Fields, and eventually getting further up toward the Ritter, a higher populated area. Going to be getting to this northern part there as we get in toward the eye wall. And we just have to be really cognizant of what is happening. Again, a new extreme wind warning. I'll give you those particulars again. I'll actually kind of give you a little bit of a rundown on what is happening overall with that, because I do want to kind of read the full text here of that warning from the National Weather Service office there in Lake Charles. They're talking about the extremely dangerous situation. To be precise, they're getting into Ward Cameron Parish, Jefferson Davis Parish, Beauregard Parish, Calcasieu Parish, southwestern Vernon Parish, Allen Parish, central Newton County in Texas. As of course in Louisiana you have the parishes, Texas you have the counties, most all other states really talking about counties there. So central Newton County in southeastern Texas, eastern Orange County in southeastern Texas, and also east central Jasper County there as well. So Lake Charles, Sulphur, Orange, DeRidder, Cameron, Westlake, West Orange, Welsh, Benton, Iowa, all getting here. The cities there in toward these extreme winds, tornado-like winds in there already cut, and really big problems. I know hearing some reports, people saying this was worse than Rita, worse than Charlie, for instance. Just some comparisons here based on some different statistics. So not what you want to hear, and I'm sure the damage will be pretty similar to what we saw with Michael. Unfortunately, when daylight does come, we'll be able to see the destruction. As we look at the latest power outage information from poweroutage.us, we've crossed that 200,000 mark now on the latest update. So I'll put this on the screen. This is the state of Louisiana here. The unofficial information as we get in toward the area. You see, as we get in toward Vermilion Parish, about 15,000 or so in the dark. But as we get to Cameron, rural area, but pretty much everybody, Calcasieu here, it's almost everybody as well. We're talking about Lake Charles. It's going to be pretty much everybody here at some point or another in that county, and unfortunately that's the case. There's a serious impact here in toward that area. Getting a report here out of the, looks like New Iberia sensor, Acadiana as well. We're talking about a report there, 56 knots, 65 miles per hour there. Some really nasty conditions moving in that region as well. Earlier we had a report 87 miles an hour in Calcasieu. A report even much higher than that. One of the ones much higher, getting in the 130 mile an hour range earlier. Looking to power outages up toward Beauregard Parish, getting the high numbers there. Vernon getting higher, and these are going to spread. We're going to see a red strip here, I'm sure, before we get done. Going all the way through Shreveport, that area of northwestern Louisiana, going to be such a serious event that we'll be talking about for a while. Unfortunately, people will be needing help in toward this region. We've been talking about it here for the last few days, but unfortunately the worst has really come true, it seems like, in many spots. Now, Beaumont may be getting spared to an extent here, it looks like. We won't know for sure maybe until the sun comes up to get the full extent of what did happen, as we're still getting some really bad issues in extreme southeastern Texas that extreme warning in play for those winds. And then as we're looking, we're also thinking maybe the storm surge wasn't quite as bad, at least in Lake Charles, because of that wind direction. Maybe just to the east and a little more rural areas getting there. That pull, getting some of the higher storm surge values. We'll have to see what happened there. But overall, it's still a very, very bad night in this region. We're talking about widespread devastation, no doubt, from the winds, at least in Lake Charles. That seems like a given based on the reports I'm getting. And with daylight coming up, we'll be seeing wind damage similar to Panama City, probably in Lake Charles. We're going to broaden the view out on this power outage map because I want to see Texas right now. We're going to take you to Texas, East Texas, Southeast Texas, getting into the accent here, unfortunately. Again, this is from poweroutage.us, and you can see here, you get some of these areas. I had Jefferson up for a second. We go to Orange County there in Texas, about half the county, Jefferson, less percentage-wise, but still pretty high numbers, but these aren't catastrophic numbers there. It looks like a situation most spots they're going to be able to handle overall so far. Now we'll have to watch to see how this path might go. East Texas further up might get some outages too that really add to this as we get there right along that border. We'll just have to wait and see. But Louisiana is going to be the hardest hit, has been the hardest hit, as we've been talking about here tonight. I'll go ahead, come back on camera right now as we switch over some things. We'll go ahead, show you that Doppler radar perspective once again with these extreme wind warnings in play. The threat here still continues. Newton County, Texas. You see some of these on velocity. We're having to use Houston because issues with the radars there, Lake Charles and Alexandria, talking about Fort Polk. But you get up here toward Kirbyville, getting in some pretty strong wind. That's going to knock at some power outages there. But still, the bulk of the wind in parts of southwestern Louisiana right now, so getting just those nasty conditions. As we get over toward Lake Charles, you can see here they're kind of going to be getting back into these winds here soon. If they're not already, again, if it's not getting the best reads, they might already be getting back into these. I know the storm chasers out there, storm trackers out there, getting that latest information, valuable data, trying to stay as safe as they can, of course, but trying to get this information out about what's going on here with this scenario. Again, a historic storm. We had to make landfall there at about, looks like 2 a.m. Eastern Time, 1 a.m. Central as a Category 4. Max winds about 150. I'll go ahead and put this comparison up right now. The strongest continental U.S. hurricanes here. And this ties for 5th on the list. This ties for 5th. You can see I have it highlighted. 6 hurricanes there. Multiple years. We have Charley on this list here, for instance, included with the 150. Another one I think we're talking about there as we get maybe back toward some of those other storms as well. It's kind of like I'm trying to jog my memory. I was putting this together earlier, but there's several, something to think, storm maybe in the 20s. I know you kind of get the idea. We had quite a few storms at 150 miles per hour just below this, and now this is the 6th one added to that list here. Added to that list as we get to that 150 mile per hour marker. Again, a historic storm tonight, one of the top 10 strongest, top 5 strongest, you could say, depending on how you break this down, in history in the U.S., making landfall according to the data. So again, we're going to watch this here as it moves further on north. We'll have to see how it affects maybe more western Louisiana than eastern Texas, as we've been alluding to, maybe more of a northerly movement that did spare Beaumont to an extent. As we've seen, still pretty bad, but not going to be catastrophic damage in Beaumont. We'll have to just see how things get evaluated as we look ahead. But Lake Charles has been a catastrophic night, no doubt. A night that they're never going to forget, and they still got more to go. They still have this other part of the eye wall with all that wind translating to the surface, coming on in there. If they're still in the eye right now, it's not going to be for long, as we have these very dangerous conditions moving on in. Very dangerous. This is life-threatening weather. This is not over, folks. This is not over. You're in the eye of a hurricane, or about to be moving out of that eye of the hurricane, depending on where you're at, here in toward Calcasieu Parish, or even back in it already. So this is a very, very bad night. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than me telling you, that you're in an eye of a hurricane, and that's exactly what is happening tonight there in Calcasieu Parish in Louisiana. We'll go to our other radar perspective right here. I've been going between this on the covers here tonight. We'll pop up radar scope and you'll be able to see what is going on there. You see Lake Charles here. We're talking about the eye wall, though. Even lightning, that's unusual. A lightning strike popping up here in toward this eye wall and you don't really want to see that with an eyewall with a strong system like this. But we're gonna just have to see how the things are going here with this scenario. I know we should have got a new update here at the top of the hour in from the National Hurricane Center. Be interesting to see if it's weakened some more. I would expect it has. But let's find out from the experts here as they're evaluating things to determine exactly what type of max sustained winds this storm does have. Again, Hurricane Laura down to 130, so we're at 130, so that's still barely a Cat 4. That'll be a Cat 3, I'm sure, as we get to that 5 a.m., 4 a.m. update. Not about 4 a.m. Central Time, but 130 miles per hour. The center there about 15 miles west-northwest of Lake Charles. Cameron, Louisiana, recently reported a sustained wind of 92 with a gust to 117. So that southern eyewall is really packing a punch. I was wondering about that earlier. I was really wondering, and unfortunately, it's really packing a punch. So, I mean, this is going, I mean, it seems like, and I could be wrong, but it seems like it's going a little slower than Michael did through Panama City. So, that wind damage is just going to be carving up. I mean, we've already heard the reports of this trees shredded pretty much, and it's going to shred even more of this. And this is a very, very bad situation. I mean, Jefferson Davis, Paris getting into the action here as well. Woodlawn there, Fenton. You get the idea. This is just a harrowing storm. Again, it's still, we talked about it, still a Category 4. I'll pull up our Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale because it'll be the last hour. I would suspect it'll be that Category 4, the catastrophic damage, but still devastating and catastrophic. That's not good. And it's going to be spreading inland here. Those mobile homes going to be problematic as we get further inland in areas you wouldn't expect a storm to really wreak havoc. They're going to wreak havoc. Those winds, that is. Those winds are going to wreak that havoc. And we're going to be here to get you through it here for the next little bit at least. And you just want to be staying tuned as we're looking up. Vernon Paris next in line for this eye wall. Eventually we'll see it spread out and winds will reduce some. But a very dangerous night continues. Southwest Louisiana especially, but also extreme southeastern Texas. We talked about it, but Houston getting spared completely. Remarkable. If this is over Houston, we'd be talking about a situation with millions of people's lives really being changed. We're still talking about hundreds of thousands of people with a life-changing type of event, or at least a event they're going to remember for the rest of their life, that's for sure. I'll be back here about 4:30. We're doing updates now at the top and bottom of each hour as we're continuing to track this very dangerous and historic storm. Never had a storm as we go over the radar scope again. One more time. Never had a storm make landfall this strong in this area. It doesn't look like. I know we had Rita back in 2005, but it was a Cat 3. This is a Cat 4. We've never had a Cat 4 or 5 make landfall in this area until right now here tonight. Tragic situation, I'm sure, as we start to review more of those damage reports. I'll be getting you through everything here over the next little bit from the Weather Center. For now, meteorologist Casey Cloud will be back at about the bottom of the hour. That's 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central. Meteorologist Casey Cloud back here at the bottom of the hour with another update on this very dangerous hurricane, still a Cat 4. As of last check, we'll get a full advisory pretty soon from the National Hurricane Center on what is happening. But you see that eye wall of Lake Charles getting back into it, unfortunately. We're looking off the Houston radar right now, but you see these winds here moving on in, indicative by that radar imagery. It's indicated by that, of course. And as you get over to the velocity, you can see the winds a little more clearly. You don't just rely on the radar to know that there's winds there. You actually see them. And this is suggesting winds about 100 miles an hour. And based on reports in that southern eye wall, definitely could be seeing that. So things that haven't been damaged already, hearing reports of skyscrapers, the windows being blown out, roofs being blown off of buildings in downtown Lake Charles. What's already been made vulnerable here by the first part of the storm is really going to be maybe destroyed here in the second part of the storm as we're getting to the southern side of things. So not what you want to hear. Bad news for Lake Charles. If you're just waking up, maybe you've slept through the night, getting up early for work. It's been a terrible night in Lake Charles, southwestern Louisiana overall. Though the storm surge maybe not as high as what we were expecting, the winds have been just as bad, and the wind damage is going to be pretty much like Michael, it seems, as we get toward Lake Charles down there from the Calcasieu Paris area down to Cameron Paris. As we get over toward eastern Texas, I think Orange, it seems like getting some pretty bad conditions there based on some reports. They've been in the eye wall, so definitely some bad problems there. But as we get to Beaumont, it seems like they might have been spared here based on some reports to an extent. Still some hurricane type gusts, but not the extreme damage that maybe we were anticipating that areas there in the southwest Louisiana got. Maybe a humanitarian crisis, unfortunately, here in the southwestern Louisiana. Based on the reports, I would think that's probably what this really is. But in southeast Texas, might be able to be something that they'll be able to recover from, especially as they get to Beaumont here in a little bit quicker time frame there. So a little bit quicker time frame there with that recovery. The latest power outage information, just refreshing it here. We'll start off with Texas this time. I think this is something that can kind of give you a good scope on what is happening here. You see 65,000 in the state according to PowerOutage.us, and Orange County there, about half the county. Jefferson County getting down toward Beaumont, though. We're only talking about a fourth of the county. That's still pretty significant, don't get me wrong, but that's not reached into that catastrophic type threshold. But as we get toward Louisiana, it's a different story. And toward Calcasieu Parish, it's going to be an area that's going to be talked about here for a long time. As we move the map back around, you'll be able to see. I was talking about that red filling in on the western side of Louisiana, and that is the case, unfortunately, here. Beauregard even now getting most of the county out and burning about half, but Calcasieu, it's pretty much everybody. There's still some listed as being on there, some power that's listed as being on, but I really wonder if maybe it might not even be really much, if any, that's the case at. Might be a kind of an error in the system, maybe a few with different type of scenario there, just where they're on a situation where a generator might be getting factored into these numbers, something like that. You just never really know. Just trying to speculate, because I would suspect that really we're talking probably getting upward of about 95% or so without power. And the first part of the hour didn't do it here. We're probably going to see the second part of the hour will do it for most of these spots, unfortunately. And you got to think about generators. I know I haven't really talked about this, but it's something that's important because you might be starting to get ready to use that generator. You got to be real careful. You got to be really careful. You got to know what you're doing, because you just can get injured, maybe even killed there by it because of the issues, the poisoning that can go along with it. So you got to really know what you're doing with those. I don't really mess with generators myself because they're just so dangerous. You can't be using them indoors, for instance. Absolutely do not use them indoors, as those are extremely bad scenarios that do arise, and a lot of fatalities come after the storm. So you got to watch out for those down power lines, because if you're not paying attention, unfortunately, something really bad could happen. So just want to kind of let you know, maybe you're watching on that mobile device from this area, just got to be really careful, because a lot of fatalities happen after the storm. and we're going to be starting to get in that here as we get about sunrise or daylight there in toward the region. So I'm just trying to give you some helpful tips there. Just got to be really careful as we look toward Lake Charles. They're definitely back into that eye wall now. I was getting reports of them pretty much getting there, but you can see, I mean, they're getting some bad conditions there. Again, in the Calcasieu Parish, Lake Charles is going to be the next Panama City, I guess you could say. And it's bad to even have to use Panama City as an indicator of damage like that. But the next Panama City is probably Lake Charles. And the next Mexico Beach is here in the Ward Cameron Parish, depending on the damage up from the storm surge. Maybe further off toward the east, you're pretty rural. Maybe talking about Ranchonee or something like that. We'll find out in the coming days. But it's crazy to think about because we went so long with a storm not being in play here like a Michael, and now two similar storms here with this last couple years or so, getting here in the last 3 seasons, and less than 2 years in terms of that calendar. So looking back as we're getting less than 2 years in terms of that time frame. So again, just really bad. It's the first major hurricane since Michael to make landfall in the U.S., but it's one of the worst, just like Michael. Maybe not quite as bad. The pressure wasn't as low as Michael's. It was, I think, in the 19s. There, about 919, something like that, somewhere in that range. And this was in the 930s, low 930s. So it may not get reclassified as a Cat 5, but that'll be something that's done in post-analysis. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say until you see that damage to even start to estimate anything like that. As we've got wind reports that have been pretty strong, pretty similar to Michael, because of course you have issues at those sensor sites that you're not getting those readings anymore. Once the power does go down, and that's problematic. You're not getting the full gust potential there measured, and you're not seeing some of that because the sites are just getting damaged or destroyed. Haven't shown the infrared satellite in a little while. Let's pop this on a different perspective here. You see that eye there right over to Quincy right now. We're in the storm. They're in the eye of the storm into Quincy. It's just something I mean, just maybe seeing stars out there right now. It's just crazy to think about. This is going to eventually cave in some as the storm continues to try to weaken a little, but it's still a Cat 4 as of now, at least officially. And we're talking about it being 40 miles inland. So it's going to be a Cat 3 probably with the update as it gets closer to the Ritter. But the Ritter, I mean, they're going to be kind of like Mariana probably was during Michael. I have this in the computer actually, about 50 miles inland. And might even be a little bit worse because it might not be able to weaken as much because of it going over that marshy type area down there, that swampy type area. So let's go ahead now and pull up graphics. This is the inland Michael damage. We've been referencing about 50 miles inland. They had winds over 100 miles an hour, and 2 weeks later, nearly 50% remained without power in Jackson County. So that kind of tells the story here. Probably what be happening there in DeQuincy. As we look at the other radar, you kind of see them being out of the eye wall. So it's interesting seeing different perspectives here. We'll pop this up right now. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about. As we get toward DeQuincy, it shows them at a little bit different spot on the map here, but they've been in that. And as we get even further up here to Maryville, for instance, they could be like Mariana. Just hard to say as we look at that destruction, as we find out what happened there. We're going to wait for the new update here at the top of the hour. As we get that information in, those details in, we'll bring them to you here at the top of the hour. It's probably going to be a Cat 3 then. But right now, still just seeing disruptive winds, disruptive conditions, catastrophic threat. Still going to be seeing a significant threat very far inland. We're talking, I'll zoom this out real quick because it's pretty much going due north, even though we were thinking maybe more of a westerly jog here or there. But we're just going to kind of put a little westerly on it. But you see Shreveport. Shreveport's about 130 miles, a big city here. And they're going to have widespread power outages. If you're in Shreveport watching right now, charge up your devices because you can't be without power for a while. Albany, Georgia can tell you all about that here, being that far inland to getting the impacts, because I'll do a quick measurement here, and that was 130 miles, so we're talking about 170. I'll do one more measurement here. We're doing this on the fly, but I think it's just important to talk about what's happening. So we're 145 miles from the center of the eye. And then from the coastline, let's talk about that. So the coast here, we're talking about 190 miles Now, speeds can be a little different with the movement, but 190 miles from the coast, we go from Panama City to Albany here. They're a little bit closer, 130, but I know Cordell got some of the impact here, getting up toward Warner Robins. They still had a hurricane, and that's about 200 miles or so away. So getting some of the impacts here that they got between Albany and Warner Robins potentially here as we look up towards Shreveport. Just trying to kind of give you a gauge on what could happen. Albany, they had power outages lasting for a long time. Widespread damage. The worst storm really they had in that region in history in terms of a hurricane landfall and just going through there. There's still a Cat 3 all the way to Donaldsonville into southwestern Georgia. It's hard to compare hurricanes sometimes, but we just saw it less than 2 years ago come through parts of our viewing area where I generally cover North Florida, South Georgia, and we're seeing that here now in toward parts of Louisiana. Going to be moving eventually into Arkansas as well. And we just got an update on that advisory, so I'm going to stay here, stay put for just a second because I see the forecast just came through. So we should be able to say that to you pretty quickly here on our other system. Again, we've been talking about Mariana. I'm talking about all that wind damage potential, but yeah, Cat 3 now. There's your update. 105 knots on the wind, so Cat 3 right now, we'll get that. I have the equivalents right here, so that's 120. So it's going to be 120 here in the update. The pressure looks like 948 millibars, so 120 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. With this, the Ritter in the accent here, we've been talking about it. Kind of weird to see. My mapping's kind of looking in here at some different things, and actually I think I got a couple towns confused here because let's see, is DeQuincy? Okay, DeQuincy's in the Iowa. There's two towns here pretty similar. I'm not that terribly familiar with this area, so I apologize. I think I kind of got you a little confused here, but we have DeQuincy and DeRidder here. DeQuincy's in the eye itself, and I don't think it was necessarily sewing up very good. At least DeRidder wasn't because it's kind of blending in with the rain. But DeRidder is going to get in the eye wall. They're going to be like Mariana was during Michael, as we're hearing some information about tornadoes potential there of those still in the region. We're going to have to watch that all the way into the heartland there as we look ahead to tomorrow. Maybe watching from southeast Missouri. I interned up there in 2015, and Cape Girardeau area are going to be seeing an impact from this storm of flooding potential as well. But DeRidder is going to see impacts like Mariana, DeQuincy, and the calm part of the system right now before the fury kicks back up. You see those flash flood warnings in play. We haven't shown you this here, but we're going to pop up our look at our rainfall estimates, and you'll be able to see 5, 6, 8 inches in some of these spots looking toward Hackberry. As you're getting south of Lake Charles, this is just adding insult to injury with the storm surge, with the extreme damage. You're getting that water inside of homes. I know with Michael, they had those tarps, those blue tarps up. They had them there in toward parts of Louisiana. Excuse me, let me back that up. Of course, Louisiana, they did have them in Katrina in 05. We'll put that in there. But talking about with Michael in the Florida Panhandle in 2018 and in toward southwestern Georgia as well. And unfortunately, they need blue tarps right now because that water's coming in on those homes without the roof, damaging everything inside. Unfortunately, it's the case, I'm sure. And getting an update here now in the chat, and this is not what you want to hear either. I'll pop up radar scope again before we wrap the update up. I'll pop up the full track here too. We gave you the quick overview here, but I'll go ahead and pop up radar scope right now as we're getting some information in. That the surge here coming up the Calcasieu chips. I'll try to say that again, the SIP channel here, and that information just coming in. The values going on up, and I'm gonna step away here just to be able to hear me. I'm off camera, but I gotta check here in the chat real quick, so just bear with me as we're getting some new information in. It's coming up there, and maybe rise there about 4 feet in the past hour. So that's not what you want to hear. That wind coming on in there, causing that surge to come on up that direction of it. I mean, and not what you want to hear. As things that surge, it was looking like maybe they were going to get spared by some of it there, but as you would expect, I guess, with a storm like this, that might not really be the case. In toward Lake Charles, you see that wind direction, that tells the story perfectly. Unfortunately, it really does, because you can kind of see it coming on in here with that wind, bringing in those numbers, those rising numbers here. And then overall, let's pop up the track. I'm gonna wrap this up. We'll be back here at the top of the hour. But Cat 1 now, we're going all the way to 1 o'clock this afternoon. Just northeast of Shreveport, a Category 1 now in the projection. And you can see that. And you see El Dorado here. El Dorado getting here into some of these tropical winds. Little Rock as we get late tonight. Some tornadoes possible as well. And that becomes a bigger threat. Even though we have the tornado threat down here, a tornado watch is in play. As I take this off, a tornado watch is in play. Beaumont, Alexandria, New Orleans there, and we're getting to about 9 a.m. Eastern time. That's 8 a.m. Central. We'll get an extension, but as we look further in, it'll be less about the wind potential and the surge, more about inland flooding and tornadoes, because those can still cause big time issues. We'll be here. We'll be watching things that risk for tornadoes today. Haven't really dove into this either. We'll do it right now. You see that risk going all the way up there to Arkansas, and then eventually we'll be watching the Missouri as well as we get into Work Friday. I'll be back top of the hour with more here from the Weather Center. For now, I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud. Stay safe out there. Back here at 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central, I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. Continue to watch now. Category 3 hurricane Laura moving on through here. The state that I getting more into toward Beauregard Parish now. We'll see that on the high resolution radars. We're looking from the Houston site since we did lose the radar out of Lake Charles there, out of the Fort Polk area as well. You still see the very strong winds. It's kind of hard to get a good read, but we're seeing this there where the calmer conditions are likely there over to Quincy. I say likely because we're not sometimes getting the exact best read on the eye position either, because there's been some reports. The radar makes it look like they're in the eye, but they're actually in the eye wall, still getting the big time issues here. We're just going to be kind of having to track that. But right now, it looks like the Quincy's still in the eye, the calmer conditions, the eye wall with the most dangerous conditions from this storm, the most dangerous conditions the storm does have to offer into the Ritter right now. So you kind of get the idea about how things are going to go. And we get all the way up to Shreveport. I think up towards Shreveport, they got to really be watching, because there's a hurricane warning in play. I mean, we are talking about so far inland. They just updated that there in the chat session a few minutes ago. Shreveport now under a hurricane warning in toward that Caddo Parish area, Bossier Parish as well. And that, I mean, we're getting all the way bordering the Arkansas border itself, and that's almost unthinkable. I mean, we're going on. I mean, I don't know if that's ever happened before. I kind of doubt it has. I mean, that means we got a hurricane warning there. Trying to measure this on the fly. I'm gonna kind of go over here to other tool and we'll pull it up. I'll see what I'm doing here on radar scope. I'm measuring from the border here to the border. I'll zoom out a little bit more here so you can kind of get a look at this storm in perspective, and we'll measure it right from here. And we're talking, it looks like about 222 miles, folks. 222 miles of hurricane warning stretching all the way to the Arkansas border at least. I haven't checked to see if there's any into Arkansas. I hope not, as the extreme warning does continue there for Jasper, Newton, Orange County, Texas, parts of those counties, and then Allen, Beauregard, Calcasieu, Cameron, Jefferson, Davis, and Vernon. That's where the worst conditions are taking place right now. We'll come back on the camera here. We'll come back and say what is happening. Again, there's the Ritter and the Ritter there. So again, let's pop on. I have another thing to show you here. I haven't shown you this. We have our alerts, and this is going to be maybe a little hard to see, but I think it could be helpful, because this will see where some of the worst damage has happened or is going to happen here, or really is in progress of happening as we look toward Louisiana right now. You'll be able to kind of see ground zero on this if we pop this up just right. So let me go ahead now and show you our mapping. So this is from the Weather Service office there, Lake Charles. I took this off their site, but I just wanted to point out we're talking about this. This looks like the severe thunderstorm warning color, but it's something much worse. It's the extreme wind warning area, and that's where you have the most destructive conditions from this situation occurring right there in that extreme wind warning area. The most devastating weather. You see areas there in North Texas like Newton, Kirbyville, and Orange, but this is mainly in Louisiana. These are areas that are going to need help here, federal help, I'm sure. These are the areas that we're going to be kind of like what we saw during Michael. Cameron in Louisiana, like Charles, we're getting up toward the Quincy. Jennings may be on the edge there. It's hard to see, but the Ritter, I've heard some pretty interesting reports out of Jennings, unfortunately, but so it looks like Oberlin in there as well. So again, a very serious situation in those spots. You're going to look like what happened in the Panhandle on Michael, where trees are just down everywhere, just shredded. We're talking about devastation here. That's the area of highest devastation. I mean, that's the quickest way to show it to you. Again, in this kind of orange-looking, brownish-looking polygon here on the screen. That's your area of devastation right in there. We don't really need to wait for surveys to figure that out. Might have some storm surge over here some more, but we're talking about the area that's most impacted there in terms of the winds right there. And we've got reports of very, very bad situations arising in Lake Charles, with glass falling from buildings there, just falling all over the place because of the destruction the wind has caused, knocking out those windows out of the high rises. Just a bad situation for that town. Calcasieu Parish, This is a national, international story that's going to be and needs to be talked about here for a while as we're looking ahead. It needs to be talked about for a while. I know sometimes I can kind of get lost in the headlines here since this wasn't necessarily Houston being impacted, but this is going to be an area that really needs help. It's going to be an area that's really been impacted, needs our prayers there again. I think this really tells the story right in there. This polygon, you might be wondering what some of these other colors are. We have flash flood warnings here. Off to the east, I think that's what that is there. Yeah, that would be the higher priority. So then this is a tropical storm warning, a hurricane warning. It means they're not under anything else as we get toward Lufkin. Right now, Beaumont's still under the storm surge warning areas to the east, and they're all in here as well, of course. As this tells the highest priority watcher warning for the areas. You see the yellow here at tornado watch, and then flash flood watch is the highest priority as we're getting right there to the edge of the screen. So I showed you that there. We'll come back on camera now. I thought that was interesting to kind of give you a different perspective, something we don't normally say here because I can't show you the extreme wind warnings on our other map. And so I thought that was just something that we needed to show you there. Again, there's our eye wall, or eye, still a well-defined eye, still a major hurricane here. As we're getting into Beauregard Paris, you see these impacts being felt here, and we're just gonna want to get people to charge their devices as we're looking further in. Here, folks. I'm just looking at some of my maps to see if I have anything else I can pull up for you at the present time. We've been concerned about that storm surge coming on in toward the Lake Charles area, maybe even rising. You think, oh, well, we've been through a heck of a night here, a night that you're never going to forget. Now you have storm surge coming in because of the wind direction. Here's that wind direction. You can see it just pulling in that surge into Lake Charles, coming up the river there and causing big time issues in that metropolitan area. So I have some other things here behind the scenes. I'm going to see if we can get up that river level. Maybe I'll pop that on here as well. We want to kind of, since we're doing these every half hour now, we're sticking on a little longer, at least for the time being. I know eventually we'll kind of tone down the coverage some. We'll kind of take down some of this coverage eventually, but while we're on, we want to give you as much detail as we can. So I'm trying to go ahead and seek out our hydrological information, and I think we have it now. We're going to go ahead and pop this on my end, and we're looking here. It looks like the readings, the last update here, well, it looks like the observations have gone offline, unfortunately, at the Calcasieu River. I was hoping I could give you a better perspective, but I'll go ahead and show this to you anyway, because as I'll zoom into it before I pop this up. But okay, here's your Calcasieu River. This will be your map here. This is on the other system, or not map. This is your graph, of course. It's late, folks, but again, record 13 feet, going to be a 15, but the last observation we had about 4, but it looks like we got it to go offline because that was at 1 a.m. Central Time. So it's like everything else coming out of that area offline, but going to be talking about record river levels potentially, and we heard a rise occurring. So this storm surge threat is not over. It may still be worse here than it's been the entire night in the Lake Charles area at some point. It's hard to say, but it's based on the reports. It seems like that's happening. It might not actually be that hard to say in some regard. As we continue to watch that, continue to track that here, I'll go ahead now and I'll come back on, and we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for right now. We're going to wrap it on up at this hour as we continue to watch here what is happening this morning. We're going to be back here at the bottom of the hour at 30 past. You see the Ritter getting to the action right now. The Ritter, we're getting the brunt. Lake Charles, let's pull up some of the winds if we still have some of these. These can be helpful here. I haven't seen many in the chat here in recent times, but we have the pressure at 981 millibars in the Ritter, 53 knot gust recently, so that gets us 61 miles an hour. Here down toward the Quincy, 59 knots, that gets us there to, it looks like 68 miles an hour. And even off pretty far to the southeast, we have Jennings, 52 knots. I was talking about you guys, 60 miles per hour. Lafayette, not near as much of an impact, but still can knock out some power, 42 knots here at the regional airport. So we're getting to 48 miles an hour, it looks like, and 48 knots as we're getting over toward areas like New Iberia. So that gets us to 48 knots, gets us 55 miles per hour. So hurricane warnings continue very far in here into parts of the northern edges here of Louisiana. As we've been referencing here, I'm going to check another thing real quick on here. I'm going to check just to see if we have that hurricane warning in Arkansas on my mapping. I don't think we do, but we'll try to let you know if that ends up being the case, because this is a storm. You would not expect a hurricane warning getting anywhere close here toward Arkansas, but what a situation we're in here. What a very bad situation it is. So I'll be back here at the bottom of the hour with more, so stick with me here in the Weather Center. Back with you once again at the bottom of the hour as we continue to watch this situation. I see a tornado warning there as we get further over into Louisiana, but we're still focused on this eye wall with tornado-like winds still occurring here. As we get further up the state, the Ritter really getting the accent right now. We'll show you that on our other system. You can see some of these winds. It's hard to tell exactly, but they're trying to translate to the surface. We're kind of on the edge of some radars here, but unfortunately Fort Polk there and over toward Lake Charles, not getting the information out of those is damage an issue down here as we look on the southern periphery, and then as we get northern areas covered, you see Fort Polk there. That's probably because of a communication issue with the Lake Charles National Weather Service there, what they did have to evacuate. But again, we're watching this situation as Beauregard, Paris, Roy gets hammered here during the eye into some of these spots, but other areas here getting the accent. Also over toward Allen, Paris, Reeves getting into this. You see Lake Charles, there's still, it seems, in the southern part of the eye wall, still getting pretty nasty conditions overall there. I don't know if we're necessarily getting a lot of reports as we're looking down there at this point as I'm looking at other system. Yeah, we're not getting any information out of Lake Charles anymore. I guess not really a surprise, unfortunately, but that just kind of goes to show you how bad things can be. But we do have a reading out of that northern part of the eye wall under Ritter, 56 knots, so we're talking about 65 miles an hour. Tornado warning continuing to the southeast here, and we're starting to focus more on those as the winds go down some, and the tornado winds could really surpass the winds with the eye wall, but we're not quite to that scenario yet. So I'll go ahead and switch over to GR Earth. You can see what we are tracking, what we are monitoring here. Some of these different spots. You can see Opelousas here. Looks like getting winds 49 knots, so we're talking about 56 miles an hour. Alexandria getting there 47 knots, that's 54 miles an hour. And I know meteorologist in the Alexandria area was reporting, forecaster there reporting winds there in the lower 50 range into toward Alexandria just a little while ago. So you kind of get the idea. That television station there. So we're looking toward the Quincy. We're still getting a reading there. I might have already mentioned that, but if I didn't, 59 knots at 60 miles an hour. So again, you see the flash flooding potential here as well. You see that flash flooding potential as we get down toward the coast, Cameron, Lake Charles area there, getting into some of this as well, in addition to the storm surge. These numbers will go up to the north, the hurricane warning all the way to Shreveport here, folks. And in the eastern areas like Monroe, getting into some of this tornadic action potentially as we're looking into northeastern Louisiana. So it's going to be a busy, busy day here as we look ahead to see what things are going to look like as we get all the way into Little Rock. A tropical storm over Little Rock's not something you expect to see, so that's going to cause some issues for them. Despite it just being a tropical storm, that's, again, you don't really see that up that far. I mean, we're getting, as we look up there, we're getting about over 300 miles away from the coast. So you see this line, we're going to get some training here possibly as I kind of look back over the last hour. We're going to see some of these values add on up, and the friction of the land here may be causing some issues. I see Center New Iberia, Acadiana, so that is 66 knots, so the equivalency there would be 76 miles an hour, so that's a hurricane force gust in toward New Iberia and Acadiana there. So not what you want to see. It's right in here, all pointed out. I know we've been kind of focused here on some of the mapping tonight. I've been pointing out a lot of things, but we'll go ahead and look here. You see it right by my hand. So again, that's New Iberia. Getting into that, these flash flood warnings. Let's see if any of these are a little bit higher threat as I kind of click around, because okay, so the one out toward eastern Texas, we're talking about radar indicated flash flooding here near the coast. The tag on this one here as I kind of click around, radar indicated as well. And then as we get over toward the east here, we're talking about radar indicated flash flooding as well. Up toward the north and east, it seems like that's pretty much the predominant story as we get further north as well. So hopefully we don't get these upgraded, but at some point when you get further inland, you can get that inland flooding threat to take hold sometimes and be pretty considerable as we look up. So you see that Cat 1 symbol. I was iterating this earlier, but I'll talk about it again. I'll reiterate it. might not be saying that quite right, but it's 5:30 in the morning Eastern, 4:30 Central, trying to keep you safe. So we're just going to try to get through things, even if sometimes they don't make perfect sense. But as you look east of Shreveport, they could get some hurricane winds, hurricane gusts around Shreveport there. And as we get over toward the east, you see Ruston there. That's Collegetown. Getting over there further, we're getting, I think that's the Louisiana Tech here, doing that off the top of my mind there. Louisiana Tech we're talking about with Ruston. I know we've covered some tornadoes there in the past. And then we have UL Monroe, in Monroe, of course. That's a meteorological school, meteorology school there. So we're going to be just kind of watching to see how that area gets impacted here. So again, we're going to be seeing Minden, for instance, getting some of these stronger winds according to the forecast, as the tornado warning in the south just got expired. So that'll fall off the map. So I'll be back here soon at the top of the hour, what we're talking about here, with more information as we continue to watch this historic storm. I'll pop up radar scope real quick to give you a different look here. We'll measure the eye. I was doing that earlier, and I think that could be something that could be helpful here. So it's breaking down some. We were talking about 30, or it's still pretty wide, 27, but it's a little bit smaller than it was as you kind of look here up toward the Ritter. Again, getting into that axis, and then as we look here, this is 20. I think it was more like 25 earlier, so we're starting to see it break down some. That's a sign of weakening, but that means the winds are also spreading out. I know we saw this in northern Florida in Irma back in 2017. The winds kind of spreading on out there, and that caused more issues over wider areas. So have to just be mindful of that potential as well with this dangerous hurricane. You see it right around Fort Polk. Fort Polk, I know we have a radar in this region, but hadn't been working. I'll see if anything comes up, but I'm not expecting it to. This will be earlier if it does come up. And that's when it made landfall. If you're just kind of tuning in, that's what the radar made or looked like when it made landfall, this storm. So center right over Cameron. This is earlier again. Not now, luckily, but as we get over there, we'll pull Shreveport, because I think you're starting to get into view of that eye now. Hey, you're definitely getting into view for sure. At this point, I might want to start using Shreveport here, and I might get a better sampling of what's going on in the radar. You see these winds in play here. These winds, Kirbyville as well. We're looking pretty high up. We'll kind of measure this on out here as we kind of move things around. It's late, it's early, depending on where you're watching from and what time frame you're watching. If you're just getting up, just going to bed, or been up all night, we're looking 10,000 feet or so up. So these are pretty high up, but we're still getting a lot of these winds reaching the surface, and that's aggravating the power outage situation here in this area. I'll come back now on the camera, and we'll go ahead and show you some power outage, the details, because I know these numbers are just going to keep going up, and unfortunately we're going to be talking about power outages that last a very, very long time. I don't know how much scarier it can be without power and a dangerous hurricane at night, and the flooding around too, and storm surge. Just not a good combination. You see Cameron Paris there, Calcasieu, nearly everybody out. Beauregard, same story. Allen over toward Jefferson Davis, getting down here to Vermilion. You can see the percentages, and I'm expecting this to go all the way up, shoot up through the western part of the state here. We're talking about all these areas. You still have power in Caddo Parish. You still have power in Bossier Parish, Webster, Claiborne, or Claiborne, depending on how you pronounce that, Lincoln Union, but that's going to change probably. You got a chart of your devices. You need a chart of your devices as you look ahead in the time frame. Charge them up, because things will be pretty dangerous there, and you might without power a while. You're not necessarily evacuating here as you get further up, as some people might have evacuated to northern Louisiana. So I would have preferred maybe people evacuating more towards San Antonio, where I think some people did go as well. But as we look at things, and update from a little while ago here, coming on in, the Acadiana Regional Airport, we just had about that gust to 76 miles an hour, and the Weather Service just reiterating that there in Iberia County, Louisiana. So you see these outages. Luckily, New Orleans not getting into things too much. They had Katrina 15 years ago, and this is not Katrina, of course, in some regards. It's not hitting New Orleans. It's not going to be as big of a national story. We're not going to hopefully have anything like what we saw with Levees Breach and anything in that regard. Shouldn't have that situation arise. But my point being, this is kind of a Katrina type event for southwestern Louisiana, getting at the highest level of event for them, and really impacting this region is something that people are never going to forget. In Lake Charles, just devastation it seems there. It's just a really, really bad night. Lives are going to be changed forever. Some people losing their lives tonight, I would suspect, unfortunately, here as well. So let's pop up your Texas outages as we kind of move the mouse around a little bit. I know Beaumont's been doing better than they could have been. We had estimates there, some of the forecasts showing gusts pretty high. That's what I had to be on the safe side. But Jefferson County there, 36,602 customers. So only 25% of the county. That's pretty good considering we were thinking maybe catastrophic damage there earlier on, and what their neighbors are going to see out toward Lake Charles, just unfathomable. As we get toward Houston, not much of an impact at all. I mean, wow, they got so lucky in Houston. We're talking about just a catastrophic event for that metro area if things did take place. And a little bit further to the west, some of the models, the European model was even hinting at this being further to the west, and instead of we have about 75,000 out in the state of Texas. So we're talking about probably all Harris County and a lot of the other really highly populated areas out. We're probably talking about instead of about 400,000 give or take in the dark right now. We're talking about probably 1 million to 2 million at least. I mean, I don't know the exact estimates. It's kind of hard to do this on the fly, but we're talking about a significantly higher number without power. But these outages are going to shoot up here. They're going to shoot up in Arkansas. As we look, they're going to shoot up in Missouri even to an extent, because I know I was here in 2015 where we had Tropical Depression Bill move through, and it caused some issues there with pretty weak winds, and this will be a little bit stronger than that. They had issues from other storms in the past that have come up as well in that region, so something that they got to pay attention to. I'll be paying attention to it here in the Weather Center, and I'll be back here in about 18 minutes or more from Mason. Stay tuned. back here at the top of the hour, we're still watching this very dangerous hurricane to a Cat 2. It has weakened, though, with the latest update. According to the Hurricane Center, down to 110 in terms of the maximum sustained winds, 110 miles per hour. You see that eye there near the Ritter, near Maryville. We're going to continue to watch it as it moves toward the Leesville area. It looked like there, as you were kind of seeing on the mapping, we're going to get Alexandria in some pretty nasty conditions here in a little bit. As we zoom back in, you see Nacogdoches here. Nacogdoches here, if I'm pronouncing that right. I would try to pronounce this again, but it's pretty late. So we're going to look up here further off to the north of Shreveport, getting the accent even over toward Ruston maybe. So you're going to be really seeing some of the worst impacts that this storm has to offer. We're going to put the radar on here. You'll be able to see the eye about 60 miles inland now with it. So to a Cat 2, but that's still really significant. We hadn't had any storms above a Cat 1, so it's pretty much like the Ritter's getting hit by the strongest storm all year still. As you kind of look at things and know, really watching it as we get in toward that area. Some flash flood warnings continuing, but with this being down to a Cat 2, the extreme wind warnings are no longer being issued further inland, so we're not talking about maybe catastrophic damage as we get further on into the picture. So that's a little bit of good news. I pop up the map and I'll refresh it maybe here in a moment for you as well, as we still are getting some winds 57 knots at Fort Polk. So we're talking about 66 miles an hour it looks like. And I have our other system of, this is the alerts from earlier. The alerts from earlier that were in play. You see in that grayish, not gray, it's brownish, orangish area there. That's where we had the strongest winds that this system had to offer. Cameron, Lake Charles, you get to the Quincy here, the Ritter, Oberlin, Newton. This is where we had probably the worst damage and are still having issues, unfortunately. Gonna have issues for a long time. This is like, this area pretty much was hit by a tornado that was really wide, stayed on the ground for a really long time, and there's no doubt there's going to be widespread damage in this area. So a very large tornado is what this is equivalent to here with the hurricane in that area. I'll refresh the map and see if that goes away. It may not. It might take a minute, but there you go. It did go away. You just see a bunch of flash flood warnings now, the headline in terms of these alerts. So we're going to continue to watch things. You see that tornado watch there is in play as well. Might get some more favorable conditions as we look ahead here in the time frame. That friction, maybe some energy here. Looking to the north, I saw even the heartland in a tornado threat for tomorrow. So I got to stay tuned there further off, talking to northern Missouri. As we are looking ahead, you see Baton Rouge here on the edge of things. And I have it in the computer. I haven't gone to it tonight. So let's go ahead and go to it while we're talking about some things. I have the LSU WeatherStem Alex Buck Stadium camera ready to go from Baton Rouge. It was one here in the area, and we're talking about some of this potential here. Winds, maybe tornadoes in this region, but overall the wind potential isn't terribly strong, and that's some good news for everybody in that area. Just trying to give you a little look outside because I don't have really weather stems in play as we get down towards southwest Louisiana, and just trying to give you a look there. This is Baton Rouge, kind of on the periphery of things here this morning. So I'll go ahead and move away from weather stem. We'll pop up our other mapping again. I see they're talking about some of the higher winds here. The highest wind seen at Lake Charles, 98 miles an hour with a peak gust to 132 recorded, and a peak gust of 137 reported at the EOC building in downtown Lake Charles. But they're going to look for anything higher and try to get a report together here, maybe as we're looking ahead in that time frame. So going to wrap it up for now. We're back about 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern with more information as we continue to watch this dangerous storm. Back here at the bottom of the hour, another update on this storm. You see DeRidder there still being impacted by the system in the eye right now, but going to get more of the dangerous conditions coming back into the picture. And I know we talked about it the night here, but sometimes it's hard to know exactly what's happening at the surface there. They could still be getting some pretty nasty conditions, but I know earlier a gust to 82 miles an hour there at the Beauregard Regional Airport. We've been on all night here, keeping you up to date, and we're going to have another update here at the top of the hour as well before we start to wrap up the coverage. But we're going to talk a little bit more here in this update first before we look ahead to that one. As we go over to our GR Level 3 computer, you can kind of see what we're talking about with this situation. You see these winds, these are above the surface. We're looking off of Shreveport because there's been radar issues, radar communication issues, but latest gust there for Polk, it looks like getting up there to 60 knots. So we're talking about winds as we look on our list here at about 69 miles per hour. So getting in toward that area, that's Fort Polk. Radar be giving us a good perspective, but unfortunately not getting that information right now. Again, you're seeing how things are going here as we get toward Natchitoches. There's a Natchitoches and a Natchitoches here. And Natchitoches here in Louisiana is going to get more of an impact as we're looking toward that Paris, that area over the next little bit. So going to be watching as we get in towards Shreveport as well later on. Shreveport, even though I'm going off here at the top of the hour with that last update, I'll still be streaming the radar because we're under a hurricane warning there. If you're watching in that area, talking about Caddo Paris, Bossier Paris, that's something you really ever see and never see in toward that area there. In toward northwestern Louisiana, getting close to Arkansas with a hurricane warning, bordering Arkansas on that. Just remarkable, another to Michael type scenario where we see these winds translate so far inland. Our second Michael scenario within 3 hurricane seasons here. And it's just so unfortunate. Lake Charles, if you're just waking up overnight, we're going to pull up our Radarscope computer right now to say you where the eye is right now and then talk about Lake Charles, because Lake Charles really took a hard hit. A very unfortunate situation there with extreme winds moving on through that area. Talking about this devastation there with high rises, windows blown out, roofs collapsed, a really bad situation. Sounds like Michael haven't seen the daylight really to tell the story yet, but just based on wind reports, it seems like a Michael type scenario happened in Lake Charles overall. Though Beaumont, we have some good news if you have relatives in Beaumont. Still pretty nasty there, but it was not a catastrophic situation in toward Beaumont at least. They really dodged the bullet. Still, I would compare it to Hermine, how Hermine impacted Tallahassee in 2016, maybe a little bit less even than that. Looking at some of the power outage information, the numbers weren't up there like Tallahassee was. So that's some good news, real good news for Beaumont, because Lake Charles is going to need all the help they can get. They're going to need all the help they can get, and I mean, as we're kind of zooming on out here, I'll kind of try to circle some things. We're going to try to, I'll kind of box it in. I'll zoom out a little bit more here because give you a better perspective. But I'm going to try to do this. This isn't going to be the best here, but we're going to do it on the fly. I'm going to try to kind of give you an idea of where some of the worst weather has happened here tonight. And it's going to happen. So getting in this little box here is where some of the worst weather has happened overall. And then as we're looking ahead, we're going to be looking ahead to the north here as we get into toward northwestern Louisiana, west central, even into Arkansas as well. And this is where you have that potential maybe for some hurricane force type gusts as we're looking ahead here. I know I'm kind of drawing this a little odd, but you get the idea. It's late, early, whenever you're watching. So we still have a ways to go with maybe winds there in that Cat 1, Cat 2 type range as we're looking toward the north. So you kind of get the idea there. Kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. This area is getting the worst or has already experienced the worst, but this area here still has the worst to come. Won't be as bad, of course, as what they got down toward the south. But we're just going to have to continue to monitor things very carefully here into the center as those areas further off north get impacted into Alexandria. You want to be watching your local TV stations there. Shreveport, same thing as you're looking ahead, because I'll be wrapping again this up here at the top of the hour with a final update here. But we're going to keep the radar going, so you at least have that look at things here throughout the morning to try to give you the latest on exactly where the worst of the weather's occurring. I'll have the wind gust information up as well. So let me go ahead and pop that on right now as we're getting some damage reports there. 18-wheeler flipped and numerous trees across Interstate 10 there westbound near Benton and the Calcasieu area there. So not what you want to hear, but not unexpected, unfortunately. But here's your wind barbs, your wind indicators. These will when you see these white indicators, that really tells you you're getting strong winds. I'll point it out if you don't see what I'm talking about. One like this right here, that's when you're really getting the strong winds, and that's in the eye wall. And I know with ECES, this was helpful, I think, for people as we're looking toward the Northeast. When we wrapped it up after North Carolina got the worst of the impact, we were tracking in the Northeast, and you could see those wind barbs. They could tell you an estimate. If you kind of look, you can kind of figure them out. But it's a meteorological type thing when you kind of dive into it. But just the white is stronger here, stronger winds, and then the purple. And then as you get to over some of these darker reds, as I think you can see this one right here, northeast there, Alexandria. This one right here, you can kind of see at the airport in Alexandria area. So you kind of get the idea, but just trying to kind of explain some of that to you there on the fly. Again, the eye's kind of caving in, a Cat 2 now. And speaking of Category 2 hurricanes, still means extensive damage could occur. I'm hoping mainly getting Cat 1 type winds at this point based on the reports. But let's go ahead and pop that on. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about on our graphic system. Again, extensive damage possible in that area, in that region. And then we're talking here as we look at some things. The strongest continental U.S. hurricane, 6 of them now as this one hit and towards southwest Louisiana, made landfall with 155 or 150 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. So maybe not quite Michael, but they'll do the post analysis on this, and we'll find out more on that. But one of the worst hurricanes here to hit the U.S. in recorded history. Looking at the list here. We'll be back in about 20 minutes with more information to wrap it up. Meteorologist Casey Cloud back here in the update center to kind of wrap things up. We're going to go ahead and show you that scale here once again. To look at things, you can kind of tell extensive damage still a possibility as we're looking further inland because this is down to a Category 2 storm. We'll go over to the radar right now. You'll be able to see what is happening here on the overall viewpoint. And you do see around the Ritter, also up toward Leesville here in Vernon Paris, starting to get into it. You can see as we get toward Natchitoches as well, and Shreveport eventually, though the Weather Service has mentioned some of this could go off just to the east of Shreveport, so Ruston could be in line or somewhere between Ruston and Shreveport. But I know it's gone over Interstate 10, gone over Lake Charles. If you're just waking up, it's caused extraordinary damage in toward that region, unfortunately. But Beaumont seems to have really been spared, at least, that they were kind of on the western side of things, didn't get into the worst that this system had to offer. But Cameron Parish and Calcasieu Parish were really impacted badly. Water entering parking garages. Some of the latest reports coming in of what happened earlier on as things are starting to retreat, starting to calm down some in Lake Charles, but they're still getting pretty nasty conditions according to the radar algorithms here. You can kind of see as we're looking off the Shreveport side, it's kind of getting further away, but flash flood warnings do still continue. It's going to be a long cleanup in toward Lake Charles. I was just showing you the graphic about the Saffir-Simpson scale, but if you were not up with us here during the night, it made landfall. Did our storm Laura, Category 4 with maximum sustained winds about 150 miles an hour, according to the National Hurricane Center. We've only had 5 of the hurricanes to do that, and 4 that have been stronger. So a top 5, top 10 type storm here, based on the data in recorded history in the U.S. So a historic night, unfortunately, here towards southwestern Louisiana. We were here to get you through it. Let's go over to the other viewpoint right now. We have one view of the Doppler up. Now let's go to the wider shot. Still getting these winds at 50, 60, 70 mile per hour range. Though the Weather Service Hurricane Center going with some stronger winds here. Still saying they think max of thing could be 105, and with some sensors down, that's still a possibility. As you kind of see this tailwind here hanging down, that could bring some heavier rain, maybe a tornado threat later on today as we look ahead, because there is a tornado threat as we get further in here. As you look at our overall risk going all the way into Arkansas today and into Missouri even more tomorrow, Kentucky as well. So stay tuned to that, and that's a threat that'll be still evolving here, even as we look further on into the time frame. Let me go ahead now and show you that radar scope computer. You'll be able to see what the perspective looks like there right now with this retreating from Lake Charles, moving away from there. But you see the Ritter, for instance, getting into some of this action right now with this eye that's breaking down, luckily, meaning a weakening storm, but still it's been a harrowing night in toward Lake Charles, a very bad night there, just widespread destruction. Maybe the storm surveys weren't quite as bad, not really sure yet, still getting that intel out of that region, but power outages are going to last for weeks, maybe even months at some points there in some areas that were hardest hit. Unfortunately, definitely a possibility. I know some were without power for over a month in Rita, and this has been described as a storm that was worse there in Lake Charles than Rita. So I think that kind of tells the story as we switch between computers. You see all those flash flood warnings in play off toward the west. Now let's go ahead and look at the power outages here, because that's something that's going to just expand. We talked about it earlier in that night, that we were going to see these power outages expand further up towards Shreveport, that red filling in, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. This is from a few minutes ago. I'll refresh that. This is 359,000 out according to Power Outage.us, and now it's 371,000 or so that are in the dark customers here. Cameron Parish, pretty much everybody out. Calcasieu as well. Beauregard, getting over toward Vernon, Rapides even, that's toward Alexandria. And then we get Grant here, Natchitoches, even over to Sabine. And this is just going to keep rising, getting to Arkansas too, probably. Western Arkansas, maybe even central Arkansas, getting closer toward Little Rock there, getting to the impact. I'll kind of broaden out the view. We'll check out Texas here as well. As we kind of move that mouse around here, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Let's try that one more time. It's very late, very early at this point. Been going all night to try to keep your friends and your family safe. I know sometimes you kind of repeat yourself a lot here, but we're just trying to give you that latest information. And we're going to check here Orange County there in East Texas, about half the county or so out. Jefferson, where Beaumont is, about a third, and that means Beaumont pretty much was spared from the worst. It would be pretty much like it is over toward Lake Charles if they weren't. It would be a county that was just completely pretty much without power, like we have over toward Calcasieu. Calcasieu Parish can have a long time that it takes here for recovery. I know I've been here a while covering this. I just hope everybody stays safe in the path of the storm as we look further up toward the view. Go back to radar scope one more time, and you'll be able to see the flash flood warning still in play, but things improving in Lafayette. Baton Rouge, they're still getting that ban. We'll have to see how that kind of sets up. But Natchitoches still in line here during some of the action, and the Iowa wall still intact enough here to cause some pretty big issues. Just pretty big issues here as we're looking further up, and Shreveport too. And by the way, just something in the chat. It just came across the wire, and I think that tells a story about how bad it was toward Lake Charles, as the NBC station had to evacuate there. The employees pretty much evacuated over toward Baton Rouge to cover the situation, but now a meteorologist that works over, I believe, still in the more Mississippi and toward Hattiesburg is reporting that KPLC has lost their tower and it collapsed on their building in downtown. So I think that just tells you how bad the destruction is going to be. That is a horrible report. We'll have to dive more into things. I know there were reports during Panama City's event there with Michael, serious situations like that occurring at the TV stations, and luckily those did not verify necessarily. They were off the air, of course, but we just want to hopefully find out that it might not be true, but it probably is true coming from a source like that. Unfortunately, I'll dive into it. There's probably more on social media about that, maybe even on the TV station KPLC there. So not good to hear that in the chat. Very bad situation there in toward Louisiana. But it's about time to wrap it up here. We're going to leave you with a satellite imagery here this morning. I'll be streaming the radar as we're looking ahead though in the time frame, and trust the local stations here as they'll be streaming probably here as you're looking in the path, giving you the latest information. I know Lake Charles streaming out of Baton Rouge. Some of the meteorologists, news personnel, they are there, and they'll be covering the aftermath for sure as we're looking ahead in time. So that eye caving on in now, good news, but still a bad storm. Still the wind, maximum sustained, higher than what we've seen all hurricane season with any other storm. So the storm's also had the most energy combined than any other storm. So you combine this storm, or you combine all the other storms compared to this storm, and this storm's been more impactful here in terms of producing that energy than all the other storms together. So a very big situation here, a very important situation to try to cover. I know kind of at some points here in the night lose my train of thought a little bit, but just trying to keep you and your family safe, just trying to be one part of the weather enterprise to do that here. There's power outages still mount. If you're up in Shreveport, still charges devices, Monroe as well, Arkansas too. You're going to lose power probably in some of these spots. As we look ahead into the time frame, I'll have that radar streaming again here by about the top of the hour or so. So stay tuned for that. But thanks so much for trusting me. No regularly scheduled update planned here later tonight. But if we need to cut back in for something storm related or local storms in North Florida and South Georgia, of course we will hear from the Weather Center. For now, I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great morning, everybody, and just stay safe out there in the path of this.